Afternoon, everybody. I would like to give you a warm welcome on this panel on clear skies, technical and legal aspects. But first of all, I would like to thank Ispasat and AEDAE and all the people who made possible this event, which has been a great success and have gathered such a bunch of great professionals. And I would like also to thank our started team of panelists today with us. My name is Violeta Gandullo. I'm a legal space consultant and a proud member of the Gender Equity Commission of AEDAE too. The first thing that I would like to stress out today is that our panel is on clear skies, which is a completely different thing of speaking or talking about clean skies, which is more related to debris and the Kessler syndrome. Though it goes hand in hand with the debris, our panel is on clear skies, all right? So it is a human problem, but it is also a legal problem since it seems to be converging two main activities, such as, for example, large satellite constellations, and there we are going to talk about solar refraction and radio frequency emissions, for example, among other things, and astronomical observations, and there we are going to talk about light pollution in large cities. But seems the right of owning clear skies has been implicitly recognized as a right by the UNESCO back in 2007, we need to address a lot of things to do today, and we need to tackle a lot of points. So first of all, I would like to thank Mr. Víctor Barrio Aranda, which is a senior associate of Hogan Lovells, and he's going to talk about legal approach collaboration proposals. Welcome, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Violeta. Well, I don't know if I can have, okay, thank you very much. Well, as you were saying, this is a legal problem. We have a legal approach to this problem. We have to be creative in all aspects, from the technical solutions, but also from the legal perspective. After Rafael Moro, who is an expert in space law and represents Spain in COPUOS, on this subject, we'll talk also about the legal approach. So the first question we have here, let me go, sorry, to the next part of the presentation, because it was about the presentation before. Well, this, maybe you talk about that after. When I'm talking with my colleagues, and especially from the science side of this problem, the first question is, which is the legal approach? Do we have something to claim or to go against people that is not fulfilling or not complying with something that is obvious, no? That we have this problem of light pollution? I have the pleasure to talk with Alejandro. He's an expert, internationally recognized. And we were talking the first time about this, the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Atmospheric Pollution, that is an old convention, but initially it was not, the idea of the objective it was not to make any consideration about light pollution, but Alejandro suggests to use this convention as a potential solution. And well, having our discussions, we agree that probably this is the first, something that we have already in the table that we can use, no? Then we will see that the conclusion is not very optimistic when using this convention because of the consequences when you are not complying with this international regulation. But if you can see in there is no need to be quite technical or it's something of common sense. Well, we agree that we are in the definition of Article 1 of the Convention. The important thing for me, the main point that lead us to use potentially this convention is that it's not only thinking about atmospherical pollution as we know in the common sense of the word, but it's also considering introduction in the atmosphere by man directly or indirectly energy. So from the perspective of light pollution with origin in satellites, as is a reflection of the sun on the satellite, that's clear in the content of the definition. Then, if you continue reading the Article 1, that really, I'm a lawyer, but sometimes it's very boring to read the articles, and especially when they are quite long. They include as a condition that this substance or energy, which is our case, must have a harmful effect on such a nature as to endanger human health, damage biological resources and ecosystem, and deteriorate material goods. I highlighted this because, of course, when we're thinking, which is the damage? There is a material damage, and this is more difficult maybe to conclude that this is under the definition, but it's totally my opinion that we can use this definition. Is, for example, when using for astronomical observations, as I see some scientifics here, some physics profile. Well, in the observatories, you have for every experiment or work, you have assigned a time slot for using an observatory during a specific time, and that costs an important amount for the administration, the institutional body, who is doing that observation and taking that data. So if due to the reflection of the light of the satellite, you are not able to take the profit of the time that was assigned to your experiment, of course, you are suffering a damage that you can quantify perfectly, because if you have, for example, 1 hour of use of the telescope and it was impossible to use it, or the results were not useful for, I guess, 5 minutes in total, you can make the correlation. So there you have a proportion, and there you can, that's very important always that they are claiming damages in all countries, is something very basic, that you are able to specify the amount to succeed in your claim. So that's the second point I want to highlight, and the last one is that that pollution, in this case, that introduction of energy by man, shall be located under the jurisdiction of an state. And of course, we're talking about objects in space, where, between space lawyers, that's pretty clear. It's like, wow, this is it's crystal clear. And in the Outer Space Treaty, we have under Article 5 and, Articles 8 and 6, if I'm not wrong, the jurisdiction under international responsibility. We will see that in the next slide. Well, at the end, the jurisdiction is under the country that registers the object. There are more rules that in other cases, but there's the basic one. And for that reason, the damage that is produced in that satellite in orbit that satellite is under the jurisdiction of the specific country which registry the satellite. The problem of this convention as a legal solution is the consequences. The problem is that here the consequence, as many times in international treaties, is just the possibility of consultations. That at the end of the day is true that from the point of view of diplomacy and international relationship between states is not nothing, is something that very traditionally is being used to protest for something. But in the beginning, a company or a public institution would not be able to receive reparation and indemnity for the damage suffered if the both states don't agree voluntarily a solution. No? So that was the first approach. And the second one, that is more even, maybe it's even easier than the first one, is just applying the Outer Space Treaty. As I was saying before, in Articles 8 and 6, we have very, it's curious because these articles are very well known in the field of space law. It's not until you talk with the scientists when you face this problem of light pollution, you don't think about using these articles in this sense. No? But once you read it, say, the solution maybe is being all the time in front of us, and we are not using that. No? And it's clear. Article 8 say that is in relation to your jurisdiction, that the state party to the treaty on whose registry an object launched into outer space is carried shall retain jurisdiction and control over such object. And Article 6 establishes the international responsibility of that state for the potential damages that is causing to other states. No? And then I also want to highlight is older than the treaty, because it was before the international treaties. I think it's 1962. But I think this consideration is not included in the Outer Space Treaty. It's, I mentioned it there, Principle 5 of the Declaration of Legal Principles Governing Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space. Principle 5 and 6, and specifically, well, you have there, sorry, because it's a little boring just to read the article, but I think it's the question here. Principle 6 states, in the exploration and use of outer space, states shall be guided by the principle of cooperation and mutual assistance. Okay, that's something that's, again, voluntary, that is common in the field of international relationship diplomacy, and shall conduct other activities in outer space with due regard for the corresponding interests of other states. If a state has reason to believe that an outer space activity or experiment planned by it or its nationals will cause potentially harmful interference with activities of other states in the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, it shall undertake appropriate international consultations before proceeding with any such activity or experiment. I mean, this is, again, is just reading the article. I think it's pretty clear. What happened, I think, is that maybe it's been accepted by the, or not accepted, but a kind of resignation in the scientist field, in the astronomic field, that, okay, we have that activity in space, is making this, it's having these consequences for us, but, you know, precisely because of the lack of connection many times of the technical world and the legal world, that we are not discussing about these simple solutions from the beginning. Now, the difficult thing is to apply this to the real world. No? For example, I was talking about this before with my colleagues, how difficult it should be for a space lawyer to go in front of a high-end of the space sector to claim about these kind of damages. I think maybe from the first years, it's true that, and especially before the starting of mega constellations, it was not a problem in the mind of the people in charge of those companies on taking those decisions. But the problem is that nowadays, when it's clear that it's a problem, it is still a kind of ignoring the scientific community, or saying that this is a problem of few crazy people, of you know, from the astronomy field, and that's the problem. No? That I think finally we will have to use something like this, a claim of responsibility through the corresponding state, to be able to, well, to stop and start to design all these space missions in a different way. Already we have also initiatives like, I talked before about the space sustainability rating. They are already including a module for certification of light pollution that is advised by the International Astronomical Union. And well, I think any kind of initiative that we have in this field, in going together the scientific world and the legal world is the proper way, no, to work together and think about. We are bringing here a couple of solutions, but of course, maybe just people listening to us, or in the future we'll find another easier one or more efficient. But that's my approach from the legal perspective. And now I think Alejandro, you're going to point out.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Victor.
Thank you, Victor.
I think you are absolutely right. Then, with the conclusions, we will come out with all this approach. Next, we have with us Mr. Alejandro Sánchez de Miguel, who is a PhD researcher at the Universitas Complutenses of Madrid and also at the Exeter Universities. And he's going to talk about urban pollution, environmental impact, and scientific research. The floor is yours, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, one of the problems that we have nowadays is that we are losing our resource, that is the natural sky, and that is coming from several sides. One is obviously all the street lighting that we need, but that the current light levels that we are using are not backed by the research. So we have up to 7 times than what the research says that a pedestrian needs to walk is what the industry has put in their standards. So it's already known by the scientific community that these lighting standards are not based on science. And one of the problems that we have is that there's the only standards, no? Those made by the industry. No, and that's a big problematic, no? That is the scientific community and the institutions should get involved more on the creation of these standards, not just trust. No? When the standards were made for just creating cheap procedures, so all were compatible, where those were not being thought directly for their environmental impacts. Obviously, then when the scientific community came, first of all, with the hole on the ocean layer, then after the damage was made, came with a standard and a solution. No? And the same problem we have now with the satellites, that I'm going to talk a little bit on that also. But right now, the main problem that we have is that we have not taken in consideration this that Victor has said. The light pollution is a pollution is crystal clear from the definition on this convention. Is recognized by the UN explicitly in the legal group from the UN. They discussed this and it's pretty clear. But even the countries themselves are not conscious that they can be taken accountable for this light pollution. For example, there was a case a few years ago how greenhouses in the south of Poland were polluting protected areas in the Czech Republic. And at the time, those governments were not conscious of this and they did it on a diplomatic conflict. But even they were not conscious that both countries signed this treaty, and with this treaty, they have a regular legal bounds on light pollution, even if their countries didn't have any internal regulations on this topic. No? So most of the countries are not conscious on their already existing laws on light pollution. And of course, if it is not spread, it's a problem, because the countries should start, and I have participated in a compilation of all regulations inside the EU for light pollution, and many countries don't have any, except the signature of this treaty. But this is going farther and farther away, no, in terms of now we see how these environmental impacts have not just on the recreation, on seeing the stars. The night is 50% of the time and at the planet at any given time, and is something fundamental for the development of the ecosystems. So that means that 50% of the planet effectively is unprotected because most environmental NGOs, the big environmental NGOs, ignore this topic with few exceptions. But then we have problems with climate change. For example, lighting is recognized by being as much CO2 as the older space industry. So you are being blamed by something that others are doing even worse. Light pollution has a big impact on the apocalypse of the insects. Light pollution have big impacts on ocean ecosystems, nocturnal ecosystems worldwide, and most of developed countries where the nature is better preserved, they have very few light pollution, so the species and the ecosystems are more naive. So a small introduction of light in those places is problematic. And even the tiny lights that the stars can create, that is the light that the satellites are creating right now, they are not blinding people, even if there's some projects to have satellites as bright as the moon, yeah, in these places, in some places. They can really disrupt migration routes. They can destroy the regional cultures. And we don't really understand how big the problem of light pollution is. No, for example, from the and this is where these mega constellations, from my point of view, and many people also in the space industry, as considered as incredible, irresponsible business, because you are sending something in an environment that is not well characterized, that is very harsh, that you need to take into account, for example, things that we don't know very well, like storms of meteor showers that we don't know well, but we know that they exist, and they can get to meteor rates like 100,000 meteors per hour, and less than 100 years ago. How, if we had problems and we lost 2 public satellites in the Perseids of 1993, and that's what was publicly acknowledged because they were public, the private anomalies usually are not reported, and that was 500 meteors per hour. What will happen in the meteor showers of the Leonids in 2033? What will happen with those meteor showers that we don't know that are going to happen? We had one recently, last May. Fortunately, there was an outburst and was not so big. And the problem is that we need also to be in space for remote sensing to control the light on the ground. We need satellites. They are really useful. Yeah? But the problem is that we cannot lose the thing of these re-entries can produce so much aluminum that can produce changes in the climate. It's such a big problem, no? That the light and the light reflected by all these debris are already over the limit that the International Astronomical Union and the International Commission of Illumination set on 10%. And this debris is producing light pollution not only in the areas that are the observatories, are also producing it in the Antarctica, all over the world. It's a fog that is going to prevent us also, for example, detecting asteroids that will have problems. For example, one of parts of my research is that historical trace of asteroids and how much on risk we are. And for example, we know that in February, there's an increased risk of big impacts, like happened in Chelyabinsk, but we don't know why. We see in the moon we see dust coming from the moon by the impacts in February, but there is no meteor showers in February, so we don't know why we are having big meteorites like impacted in Madrid in 1896, the same date as Chelyabinsk. Now, if we have so many satellites and so much debris producing light pollution, is making that our observatories cannot observe dawn and dusk. We have to spend much more time on removing all these not useful data, and it's really something that I think we should not risk our safety from the space, all these satellites, but also from the ground, because all this light, if it's a problem, all this light from the space, you can imagine how problematic it is for our mechanism, our hormones, all the lights that we are wasting inside here. And also many of the lighting for aeronautics is also a problem. For example, now we have a problem near Carol Alto because they want to put these huge auto generators, and if they are over 100 meters, they are forced to have a light. And never had been reported a collision in the whole history, never have been a collision reported to an aero generator. So, and nowadays there is other avoidance through other kind of ways. So it's a bit, some of these regulations should be done in collaboration with the scientific community, and that includes astronomers, but also ecologists, also climatologists, people that really understand the uncertainties on these risks. No? So we don't send nuclear bombs and the space, and then we have problems on the Earth that we don't know how to solve. No? And I wonder if, until there is not a human death, by a debris or by something like this will happen. And on light pollution, we already had deaths. For example, the Titanic is considered the first big catastrophe produced by light pollution, but the light pollution of the own boat. In Gibraltar, a few years ago, there was another collision with and the light pollution was blamed, created by the two countries. So could have been accountable, not for so much wasted light in the Strait of Gibraltar. So the light pollution is not just something crazy for astronomers. It's something that is impacting every one of us in our sleep, in our environment, but also in our businesses and other risks that are way bigger.
Thank you very much. So here, let's throw our concern on that there are a large part of the planet unprotected that is due, among other things, that there are not light standards regarding the satellite, and the light satellites are not based on scientific measures. And also, of course, all the concerns regarding the space weather, meteor showers, solar flares. Yeah. We already had one last week. And that, of course, it's going to have an impact on us and on our industry. And as a result, it's going to have an economic cost. So let's come with the conclusions. Thank you very much, Alejandro. Next, we have with us Mr. Rafael Morro Aguilar, which is an LLM lawyer at the Florida International University, and he's going to address about the international law regarding the clear skies. Please.
possible to present from the
Of course.
from the podium?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
You have here the... Thank you.
Thank you, Violeta.
Welcome.
Is this working?
You feel comfortable with that?
Uh,
Which one he should use? Which microphone?
this one.
Oh, that's for me. Okay, thank you.
This is working, right? Okay, good. And totally with what Alejandro said, I think this is a big growing problem, and this is a real issue. I would like to start off with an anecdote. Last night, I went out to the park because I wanted to see the conjunction of the moon with Saturn. So I went to the Retiro and watched the sky. It was beautiful. It was beautiful, except that for the 20 minutes that I was at the Retiro Park, I saw a train of 10 satellites passing by. Not just one, not two, 10 satellites. That's a real problem and a real concern. Oh, I don't have the...
No, it says...
Well, okay, I'll read it.
I think you have it there.
No, no.
No, es porque no está la presentación.
Ay.
Está bien. It's okay, I'll see it from there. So you can see this beautiful painting by Van Gogh. This was, we could say this was the start of light pollution, right? And that's when the sky started getting ruined because of city lights. Neither Van Gogh nor anyone else would have expected ever to see this. This is not a real image, of course. This is a composite of, or a long exposure image taken for a while, but still, it is a perfect example or a perfect showcase of how many satellites are actually flying over our heads on every given time at every moment. You can actually record that. And of course, if you're trying to do astronomy, any serious astronomy, well, you can see it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that. This is, first and foremost, a highly technical problem. In principle, requires technical solutions. However, this can also be seen as a legal problem, because there seems to be two human activities that are conflicting with each other. We have large constellations of satellites on the one hand. We have astronomers and astronomical observations on the other hand. We also see that there is currently a total lack of regulation of this topic. There is no standards, no limits on the visibility or brightness of satellites or space objects, talking generally. However, we do have a number of already existing international space law rules, some general international law rules, and some pieces of national legislation that either could apply or at least could be relevant to this case, to this issue, and inspire or help provide some solutions. I have been coordinating for the last 2 years a working group for International Institute of Space Law on this topic, and this report came out, was adopted by the ISL in June of this year, and what I'm going to present is the basic conclusions that we achieved in this report. Some of them, by the way, were already mentioned by Victor, or at least some of the provisions that I'm going also to mention. So first and foremost, we have, of course, the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. Article 1 establishes freedom to explore and use outer space. That would be good for the constellations, but then also Article 1 establishes freedom to conduct scientific investigation in outer space, and that would seem to support astronomy and astronomical observation. In any case, both astronomy and satellite constellations are legitimate, lawful activities, so the Outer Space Treaty does not establish any priority, any hierarchy of any kind between these competing two lawful space activities. So As a result, both activities will be can be considered on equal footing and will have to coexist and achieve coordination. Next, we have Article 3 of the Outer Space Treaty. Article 3 establishes that all space activities have to be conducted in accordance with international law. This opens the way to the application of other branches of international law in outer space, like, for instance, international environmental law, the Transboundary Convention that Victor mentioned. Some basic principles of international environmental law that might apply here include sustainable use, prevention of transboundary harm, the precautionary principle, or the duty of states to avoid contamination of areas located beyond their national jurisdiction. And one of those areas, of course, would be outer space, which is located outside the jurisdiction of all states, right? Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty establishes state responsibility for all national activities, including those conducted by private or non-governmental entities, and also the duty for all national activities to receive an authorization and continue supervision by the responsible states. States are responsible for ensuring that all space actors will act in conformity with the Outer Space Treaty, and they must guarantee a responsible and sustainable use of the Earth's orbital space environment. And arguably, this would include now the light pollution caused by their space objects. Now, Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty would be the one that is most relevant for our case, for this issue. Establishes several duties that would apply here. The duty to pay due regard to the corresponding interests of other states. Also, the duty to avoid the harmful interference with the space activities of other states or of other parties or other entities. So, for instance, the light pollution created by satellite constellations if it causes a harmful interference with astronomy, that should be taken into account. There's also an obligation to consult with affected state parties in case of an ongoing or potential harmful interference with their activities. Now, a very important question is ground-based astronomy protected under Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty? Because the Outer Space Treaty, in principle, is meant to regulate only space activities, nothing going on in the ground, or really very little going on in the ground. However, I've done research on this. It is not clear from the text if ground-based astronomy could be protected under these due regard and no harmful interference obligations, but I have defended in some papers that it is, because we've used historical interpretation of Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty. We find that the origin of this article comes from certain large-scale experiments that were conducted by the space powers during the early 1960s. And the effects of those experiments were felt both in outer space and on the ground. Therefore, we have a precedent of some space rules applying to ground-based activities as well. Okay. Another interesting line of thought that I think also was mentioned by Victor is light pollution, a harmful contamination of space, or could also be considered an adverse change of the Earth's environment, within Article 9, the provisions of Article 9, and I personally think that it could be interpreted that way. It could be defended that this light pollution is the introduction of sunlight, unwanted introduction of sunlight collected in space and introduced in the Earth's environment, in the Earth's biosphere. What's the problem? Article 9, in principle, looks very promising to solve the problems, or at least to start addressing the problems of this light pollution. What's the problem? The big problem with Article 9 is very vague. It is written, perhaps deliberately, on vague terms with undefined. All these terms are really undefined: due regard, harmful interference. Nothing of none of these terms are defined under Article 9 or under the Outer Space Treaty in general. So, and we have this problem whenever we try to apply Article 9. And the other issue we find whenever we try to apply Article 9 of the Outer Space Treaty is the lack of state practice so far. This article is like it's very beautiful, but it's like a sleeping beauty. It has never or very seldom been applied in the 55 years of the Outer Space Treaty. You can hardly find any single case where this article has been applied so far. That makes it very difficult, not impossible, but makes it harder to apply Article 9 to this problem, or to any other problem where it might apply, really. However, some regulation is needed, no matter what. That's my personal opinion, and that's what I've been defending for some time now. Some future regulation will be necessary, and possibly it could start with some non-binding standards, some guidelines that will be applied uniformly to all operators. If the international community decides to create those standards, then the best place to do that would be the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, COPIUS. Already a number of standards and guidelines have been created there, have been negotiated and created there, like the Space Debris Mitigation Guidelines in 2007, or the Long-Term Sustainability Guidelines in 2019. So we could use those as a model for a new set of guidelines limiting the light pollution by space, caused by space objects, okay? This model offers flexibility, at the same time certainty to governments and operators. So the idea would be to create a series of non-binding guidelines in COPUOS that states would accept and gradually apply through their national space laws. A number of states are already proposing this in COPUOS. Unfortunately, COPUOS, it is not easy, it is not always easy to make decisions in COPUOS because it requires, COPUOS works on the rule of consensus. All states members have to agree to take an initiative, to adopt an initiative in COPUOS, and with 102 members that COPUOS has at the moment, this is becoming increasingly difficult. And in any case, most states were this year, in the sessions or meetings of COPUOS this year, most states were in favor of creating a working group on this topic to at least start discussing, if not already creating guidelines, but at least start discussing what is the problem and what could legally be done, or what would be the technical standards that could help solving this problem. And then just one single state, it was Russia, by the way, decided not to do that, not to create this working group, and just because of the negative of a single state, COPUOS could not. Let's hope next year the interested states will insist, and hopefully Russia or whatever states are not interested will reconsider. Let's cross our fingers. In the longer term, we could find other kinds of solutions. We might decide to conclude agreements protecting astronomy, international agreements, international conventions, or international conventions protecting the quality of the night sky. We already have a soft law text on this. It was already also mentioned by Violeta, the Starlight Declaration that was adopted in La Palma in 2007. So that's a good start, or a stepping stone to start negotiating a more binding agreement on this topic. Some people in the working group that I coordinated also came up with very creative solutions, like they pointed out to the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, or the 2007 UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Both texts indeed seem to acknowledge the importance of participating in cultural life and science, and also the right of indigenous peoples to perform ceremonies and maintain their traditions. And sometimes their ceremonies and their traditions involve a natural dark night sky, okay? So you are stepping on the rights of these indigenous people and possibly stepping on the rights, by polluting the night sky, you're polluting on the human rights of every citizen on Earth. Because we would have this right to participate, to have a dark night sky, to participate, to fully participate in scientific and cultural life and science. All this suggests that stargazing and the right to natural dark night sky are increasingly viewed as a fundamental right or heritage under general international law. Solutions to this problem may also come from national space law. Our working group tried to find any existing national space law limiting the visibility of space objects, but we could not find anything, except for a very exotic law in the United States that forbids intrusive space advertising. But does not apply exactly to our problem. But on the other hand, it is a precedent that something can be done on this topic, also at the national level. We identified, on the other hand, that there's a huge number of national and local laws and regulations, as mentioned by Alejandro, and also that there's not only at the EU level, but generally worldwide, there are plenty of local laws and regulations protecting the quality of the night sky. What will happen with all those local laws and regulations? They will come to nothing if there's a global pollution of the night sky. Doesn't matter that there's a law or a regulation protecting locally the night sky, if the night sky is going to be polluted globally anyway. So you have to take into account all these legislations that exist all around the world and show them as yet one more argument against globally polluting the night sky by space objects. Satellite constellations and astronomy are both lawful forms. There must be a coordination to exercise both freedoms. Both are allowed by the Outer Space Treaty. There is currently a lack of regulation, but a number of already existing provisions could inspire a future international model or regulation, international regulation of this topic. Possible first step, the most likely first step towards an international regulation would be the adoption of non-binding guidelines in COPUOS, limiting the light pollution caused by satellite constellations. These guidelines would then be picked up by national legislators and be applied locally, nationally, to their different operators. We could also think the opposite thing would also happen. National standards might be set up first in the key countries that are authorizing these satellite constellations, for instance, the United States, and then out of those first national guidelines, then international guidelines could also be developed or conceived. In the longer term, hopefully we can envision international agreements protecting astronomy as a human heritage or as a human right. By astronomy, we can include stargazing generally, or enjoyment of the dark night sky generally, and complementing the many national laws and regulations that currently protect locally, at the local or national level, the quality of the night sky from light pollution. Thank you for your attention, everyone.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. So despite the lack of regulation, sorry.
No problem.
Despite the lack of regulation on this topic, you both addressed that many of the answers may be in the main space treaty back in 1970, because it enabled to conduct the space activity, and despite it does not establish a hierarchy on the activities. Some, especially Article number 9, as you pointed out, may allow us to protect our clear skies.
Hopefully, yes.
Yes, and also as a possible solution, you addressed the non-binding regulations, which is the soft law.
Soft law.
Because it adapts very well to this matter. Thank you very much. And technical problems requires technical solutions. I like that very much. Thank you very much. So next, last but not least, Susanna. Mrs. Susanna Malone is a PhD physicist, CEO of Luminica Ambientat, analysis of light pollution, and she's going to talk about verdicts and some sentences on light pollution. So the floor is yours, please.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Violeta, it's my pleasure to be here.
Our pleasure.
Thanks
Susanna.
for inviting me to participate in this forum and say my and share my over 20 years of experience in this technical field. So, we know that there are a huge of papers and scientific research have been published, and Alex is one of the leaders at international level about this. These studies empirically indicate that the increase in light pollution and its harmful effect of night sky, nature, and people. Yes. Espera, que voy a cambiar yo. Sí, es que estoy cambiando aquí, pero no estoy cambiando ahí, perdón. Sorry. Okay, yes. Over these years, we have carried out thousands of in situ measurements of the night sky brightness, and we have seen the reality firsthand. So the horizons are becoming more and more contaminated. Here you have an example. This photo was taken from a biosphere reserve. That should be an oasis of darkness, but unfortunately we can see that the sky glow extends over more than half of the sky, almost 40 or 60 degrees from the ground to the CNET. Actually, it's getting harder to find a truly dark spot, both on the zenith and horizons. As my colleagues on the panel said before, currently there is no specific law in Spain that fully defines technical requirements needed to address light pollution in terms of sky brightness, magnitude per arcosecond square. Moreover, there are no limits or red lines on what is acceptable, as our colleague Salvara frequently points out. Well, there are mandatory regulations in several autonomous regions, such as in the Canary Island with the Ley del Cielo, specifically in the island of La Palma and the part of Tenerife with a view direct view of La Palma, as well as in Catalonia and with the decree 119 and its successive resolution, including the approval of its light pollution map in June this year, and even municipality ordinances. But at the national level, we only have regulation in the field of the energy efficiency, with the Royal Decree 1890. And its technical complementary instruction, number 3. It addresses sky glow and especially intrusive light to control discomfort to citizens and nocturnal biodiversity, but as I say, it neither regulates nor addresses the problem in a proper way. So at present, from my point of view, the current state of outdoor lighting projects has at least 3 incomplete components. First, current legislation obviously is inadequate, and it is not target light pollution, as mentioned previously. Secondly, planning. We must carry out preliminary studies of the actual and real situation through audits or measurements to establish the starting point and plan action, frequently via master plan, for example. Next, it is crucial drafting comprehensive technical and administrative bidding documents for construction works. I think it's very important. Followed by monitoring the final results, both lighting levels and environmental impact, as Alex said before. Thirdly, professionals involved in these projects, including lighting designers, project developers, site managers, require better awareness and training. So at the moment, I think we have the technology. LED I think is the time of the LED. Obviously, it's a strong technology and efficient, more or less. But the issue, however, is the lack of education on this matter and the absence of clear limits and red lines to determine what is acceptable or not in terms of light pollution. I think this is the big problem. No? Regarding the impact on people, specific complaints related to intrusive light are becoming more and more frequent. These complaints are mainly attributed to outdoor lighting luminaries, but can also be associated with LED screens, industrial installation, sport like this paddle court, for example, and renewable energy installation, as Alex said, in Calaralto mainly, wind farm, for example. I have directly involved in several expert assessments on this matter at this moment, and one in particular results in a legal proceedings in the court of Logroño, which, by the way, we won. As far as I know, I think that there is the only fair decision on light pollution in Spain. The neighbor, Almudena, en este caso, filed a complaint on the city hall because she was disturbed. Sorry. Okay, this is the, okay. Because she was disturbed by the lights from the new street light coming through her window. It was causing her anxiety, stress, sleep deprivation, and she told me she was at her breaking point. It's so crazy, the situation. You can see how he had to cover the luminary, but well, it sounds like a joke, but it was real. It's a very dramatic situation. However, after the administrative silence of the city hall, she finally filed a complaint in the Logroño court. And at this moment, she contacted me for advice on how to proceed. And our first step, obviously, was to carry out an expert assessment by measuring intrusive light and ensuring compliance with the royal decree and its technical instruction number 3. Here you can see some images of the measurements carried out, and the results were overwhelming, with over 90% of the building facade and windows exceeding the vertical illuminance limits set by the royal decree, depending on the specific zone, in this case, a rural area. So it was E2, but if it was an E3 zone, the result would have been than 60%. So it's obvious that there is a problem with intrusive light, and the judge was very categorical about this. You can see some of the extracts of the judgment. Is in Spanish, sorry, but no podía traducir todo. Okay, but it's obvious that there is a problem with light intrusive, the intrusive light, and afterwards the city hall filed an appeal, which was dismissed, and finally we we have a final judgment number 139. I remember that at the trial I had to obviously testify corroborating the expert report conducts, but I was corroborating and justified how light could result in light pollution and causing discomfort and the adverse health effect for the neighbor, Almudena, in this case. In fact, the judge expressed interest in this topic and asked me numerous questions to educate herself on the issue. I think was a very strange moment for me, but it was great because the attitude of the judge. The engineers and the local authorities couldn't give an answer. Impossible. Firstly, because obviously the measurements were conclusive, and secondly, because they had no idea what we were talking about, and were not familiar with the topic, with the science. So one of the key aspects that needs to be improved to reduce light pollution is the training of lighting professional. Is one of my conclusions. Okay. And the last one, I think is very important sorry, aquí, esta es la sentencia firme. I think that today we have a draft, entre comillas, of the new energy efficiency regulation, which has been prepared but has not yet been published in the BOE. We hope that most of the comments and suggestions from various scientific, astronomical, and lighting, and even lighting working groups have been taken into account. This is crucial if we want the regulation to be applicable and truly effective in controlling and mitigating light pollution. Okay. I think it's, yeah.
Thank you very much, Susana. Is it working? Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Susana. So once again, the lack of regulation and the most pressing reason to take care of clear skies also because it has a biological impact.
Yes.
In all of us. And the ability of stepping out, look up in the sky and enjoying the stargazing and all the stars, and that is very important. I would like to ask you, well, thank you to all the panelists, super interesting. It's super important, this topic. And I would like to ask our attendees if any of you have any question. No questions? Okay, so as to conclude, everything points out that this is going to be, and it's my personal wish here, a fundamental right, because it has an essential and a very important impact on our biological and on nature too. And it's not only NASA was addressing, you both mentioned it, the right of the indigenous culture to perform their rituals under a clear skies. It's not only that, it's the right that every citizen has of enjoying a clear sky. So, again, my question and my wish, is this going to be a fundamental right?
That's a question, Elisa, sometimes we have to talk about this.
Para ti.
No, Elisa, I was mentioning just a discussion we have, not a question for you. No, that we have this discussion about dark skies is not a fundamental right. But of course, I think because never in the human history we had to fight about this right. It's like the right to breathe, or the right to listening to music, or to enjoy art. The theater, movies is part of human being, no? Even some of us have more passion than others for dark sky. It's something is part of our nature, and of course, it should be recognized because, and I agree with you, it's already a fundamental right, even it's not writing down in a law, but for sure, I think in the future, it should be included as a fundamental right.
In my opinion, in some declarations is already included, like the right to have a clear air, and that's in some declarations and nature. The problem is that we have a public perception that the technology and all these technology developments give us so much advance, but many times this advance is not even audited. No, like the amount of research done on how light increase the safety is so bad that any research, so even my students in statistics had in the last exam one of the most prestigious studies on this topic done in New York, and people starting in statistics knows that research was done with no rigor, even if we spent millions of dollars on that study. No, so that's the problem. That if even the fundamentals of why we lit the floor are not well studied, how we are going to discuss on other things that are even dimmer, like the skies and so on. So the problem is that we need more research, but for the people that wants to prove that they do those things that they supposed to do are done. We don't need anything more to prove that the light pollution is harmful. That is already proven by far, mainly on the nature. What we need now is that the industry and the institutions that wants to put so much light or these satellites need to prove that they really need that light at that levels. No? Because right now, except for undeveloped countries, we don't need more light.
Yes. Yes, as I said in my presentation, I think this is an emerging human right, and I hope it will be recognized soon. That's my expectation.
It's a very problem, and I think that's more than lighting designers and professionals, even citizens, because more light is not conducted to secure in the street. It's better the good quality of light. I think it's very important to present this one.
Thank you very much. So I would ask a warm clap for this wonderful team. We are closing the event. I would like that the president of AEDAE joining us for a last picture. And let's wish that we are not making a wish on a roving satellite that I think we have already done, because please join us, because unluckily when we step out, we only see the stars that shine the most or the bigger ones. Thank you very much to you all. Thank you for attending and thank you for this event. Would you like to close the event?
Thank you very much to all the organization. There is Space Integration Week, Kenneth, Chabela, well, all of you, the camera, the sound, all of you, the assistants, of course, the panelists, and the Ispasat sponsor that has been very important for us. Thank you.